The Pacers have 11 wins, which is nearly double the total from the last time we spoke to you, the viewers of YouTube. Over the last month, they've started making some shots, sometimes, climbing into the top 15 at three-point percentage. They beat the team with the best record in the NBA, avenging their Game 7 loss in the building where more than just Game 7 was lost. They've started a few games without a traditional center, testing to what degree they can quote-unquote furf around and find out, with Pascal Siakam playing it as the tallest player. And a few players, particularly those on the wing, have started to spread their metaphorical wings. As envisioned, are the Pacers winning at development, even if they aren't winning overall? That's the question that we're here to answer today through the medium of mailbag questions. Coming back, my longtime co-host, Samson Folk.
Latent becomes nascent is what we're hoping for in this season, I think, in many different regards. And there's been a few things that have been proven true that are important. Pascal Siakam, still incredibly good, and not just in like big box score numbers, but kind of like driving certain big trends you want on the floor. Andrew
All-star,
Nembhard,
some might say.
an all-star, some might say. I got in trouble because I said that Scotty was kind of jumping into the Pascal tier of player with how good he's been. And people are like, he's been clear path. I don't know, man. Pascal's really good at basketball. And listen, it's not bad for Scotty to be on that level either.
I'd
It's
be
a
pretty
high
happy if
level.
I was in the Pascal tier.
Yeah, that's all NBA, ECF MVP, all this kind of stuff. Regardless, and we're looking at young guys trying to make that big leap, that big step. Some of them from like fledgling to rotation player, some from like firm, cemented rotation player to more than that. And there's been some good progressions this season, even if we're only starting to see some of them now.
Yes, finally. I'm actually excited for this episode because while we don't really have to nitpick a lot of negatives throughout this proceeding, we also get to talk about players that you and I actually haven't talked about that much this season. Beginning with, we have been the foremost proponents of Andrew Nembhard, I
Our
feel,
boy.
since his rookie year, but we really haven't talked about him that much this year. So, kicking off with the mailbag questions, the first one is about Andrew Nembhard. Cassie Per says, since Nembhard returned from his shoulder injury, his assists per game keep increasing. 6.4 in November, 7.1 in December, 8.4 in January, while his turnovers per game keep decreasing. 2.5 in November, 2.4 in December, 2.2 in January, albeit at a slower rate. What do you believe has led to this steady improvement? Is Nembhard starting to process things faster and better with more experience at point guard? Before I kick that over to you, I can add a couple numbers here because the raw assist numbers, Samson and I agree, don't always reveal that much in general, but particularly with the regard to the Pacers, they don't, because the Pacers started making shots in January. So assists are actually going to go up somewhat just by virtue of you making shots. But I looked up the potential assists per 100 numbers, and in January, Nembhard's averaging 21.2. That's the second most in the entire NBA, and that's close to what Tyrese averaged last season at 22.3. And then a number that I like to self-calculate a lot in terms, especially for ball handlers, rather than using usage rate, I like to take their average touches times their average touch time and divide that by the team's average touches and average touch time. So Nembhard's only had the ball 17.1% of the time, which Tyrese only had at 17.9 last year, which is why it was so remarkable that, what he was doing, dominating as a passer without dominating the basketball. And Nembhard's been somewhat similar here, at least in the month of January. So what have you seen from him, foremost counter of advantage assists, Samson?
So it is important that you say in terms of, an assist is always an assist, yes, but is it always conveying our idea of what an assist is, even kind of the meaning of assist, not in NBA terms, but perhaps in real terms? Like, did you assist somebody? Sometimes you assist somebody in NBA terms and you didn't in real terms. I know this is nonsense what I'm saying, but I think it is the fact that there's a big number here, which is that he's passing in January on 50% of his drives. That's the NBA.com number, which is from Second Spectrum, Genius Sports, whatever. and his turnover percentage is 1.8%. Prior to this, he's passing on like 42% of his drives, and his turnover percent is almost 5%. So all these things are coming crashing down, and this might have a heavy correlation with shot making. If you're the leader of the offense in some sense, or at least co-leader, and for however many months it's the worst shooting team in the league, you might feel a little bit more like, I might settle into this little jumper of mine, this little midi, which he's been quite good at, over a point per possession on drives this year. You might say, I have to keep things to myself. You might force something. Higher turnover percentage, less pass percentage. Guys start making shots. Suddenly the floor opens up a little bit. You have more breathing room to operate in the middle. You have more shots on the back end of it. I don't know if I've seen a huge change in how he's processing the floor, because I've always liked how he's processed the floor, quite frankly,
Mhm.
especially as a passer. But I do think that the context of the team has supported him and put him in, a stronger position to succeed, which is also part of the situation with Tyrese last season as well.
What's interesting to me, a couple different things, is that when you look at the types of passes he had, or at least when I did, the ones that were potential assists, it's majority perimeter passes like swinging around the outside or drive and kick live dribble kickouts. Like it's not a lot of post entries or elbow entries or even attacking passes where other people are crashing hard to the rim, because the Pacers aren't a team with a lot of rolling threats. They don't run a lot of picks where anybody's moving toward the basket. They either are running pick and pop, or they a lot of times have, Tony Bradley or Isaiah Jackson more so parked in the dunker spot. They haven't
Yep.
had a lot of roll threats this year. So that's something important to remember, especially because in January, Andrew, which this isn't updated from yesterday's game because the number hadn't updated yet when we started to do this, but he's played 150 minutes with Jay Huff, 101 minutes with Micah Potter, 49 with Bradley, and only like less than 10 with Isaiah Jackson because of these injuries. So the geometry of the floor is different because they've almost always been playing with a spacing big when he's been out there. And I'll read you this quote because I doubt that you heard it, but Aaron Nesmith at Media Day, when he was asked about the difference, like what's going to change as far as pace when you're going from Tyrese to Andrew, I think a lot of people interpreted what I'm about ready to read from Aaron as meaning he meant that, you're going to play slower in the open floor with Andrew than you are with Tyrese. I don't think that's what he was getting at. So he said, we're going to play to Drew's pace. Andrew sometimes likes to take an extra dribble. He's a real downhill player. He gets to the paint a little more than Tyrese. So it's just about finding ways to be more open and available for him. So Tyrese really likes to play above the free throw line. Like when I wrote the piece about his jump passes many moons ago, it was very rare that he was breaking the free throw line. He does all of his passing processing and wants to get off the ball very early. Andrew's somewhere in between Tyrese and TJ, but he does like to get deeper down the floor, which is where when I run these clips, I think this is kind of where you see the before and after, because when I was also looking at the numbers, I told Samson ahead of time, Andrew hasn't had a lot of rim assists this entire season, in part because of what I just said. He's not playing with a lot of rim roll threats for him to actively be lobbing to. Isaiah hasn't been as much vertical pop this season as what he was,
Wait, can I ask you a question
pre-Achilles.
to
Yeah.
so is this your version of rim assists, or like a shot that finishes? Because if you go to and this, I'm going to give it so you can set this out for the listener. If you go to like Data Baller or something, he's like 81st percentile in rim assists at 3.7 a game. Why is this not necessarily conveying what you and I would think is the truth of the matter?
Well, like to paint a picture, like a play that you'll hear Rick Carlisle calling all the time. He'll say like Omaha, Omaha, and it's a lot of times like Andrew's going to be pushing ahead and Pascal's going to be a trailer, and Andrew's going to go slot to slot and he's going to pitch it back to Pascal from outside the 3-point line is where the pass is actually, the point of the pass is outside above the break. And Andrew, like, there's craft required in that. You have to take the right attacking angle. He's makes a lot of contact as a screener. It does free up Pascal, but then Pascal's taking like a couple dribbles and he's really the person slithering to the rim. He's not making a pinpoint pass at the rim to dime him. And that's not to say that Andrew can't do that. He just doesn't have a lot of people on this roster this season to do that with. So the biggest change from pre-January to now in his assist rate by range is above the break 3-point attempts. That's where we're seeing the biggest difference. But I had all this prepared, and then he played a game against the Atlanta Hawks yesterday, and he made several passes directly at the rim.
He did the pickup, survey, and ping it down low.
Correct.
Yep.
So this is the overall story that we're going to look at with the film, which let me back it up, because I really like this one on a sideline out of bounds play. It's kind of like a baseline off-ball screen rescreen that Andrew decided to pop out to the corner there on, where Dyson Daniels tried to cheat it. He thought that Andrew was going to go to the top of the key, and Andrew went to the corner. So that gave him a head of steam. He's going to draw two along the baseline, and then kudos to Johnny Furphy for actually cutting from one block to the other, because that's putting a ton of tension there on that weak side defender, and a lose-lose between staying between Pascal or going with Furphy. Andrew manipulates it. He looked at Pascal and he passed Furphy open directly at the rim. To me, that is a rim assist, Samson. Yeah. That's what that actually looks like. Same thing here. Botch switch from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He ends up having to go to Micah Potter. Andrew looks at Pascal to get Dyson to shift back towards Pascal. Wide open pass right at the rim. Again, that's a legitimate rim assist. And then Andrew again attacking very deep and makes the little wraparound pass to Pascal to get him open. So this was actually a change from what we had been seeing earlier on in January. The other differences that I've noticed, again, because he's playing more with Jay Huff, he's playing more with Micah Potter, he has a trailer and he has an outlet more often at the top of the key, where Davion Mitchell actually ducked under there. The Heat really like to help off the strong side corner quite a bit. He draws a crowd and is deep, and like Aaron said, you have to know and be able to find the passing windows behind how deep he attacks with that extra dribble. Micah Potter backpedals and attempts the three. This is earlier in the season. You're playing with Isaiah Jackson. You and I actually talked about this play a couple of podcasts ago, but I think it's instructive. Isaiah here either needs to stay spaced to the corner or he needs to go behind Andrew and catch that drop-off pass. This is doing nothing for the spacing. So Andrew's kind of just stranded into the paint with no passing outlet. It's a turnover. Against the Toronto Raptors, pretty similar. Tony Bradley parked in the dunker. The weak side spacing was pretty messy for the Pacers early in this game. That's not where you'd want them to be. I think ideally Tony Bradley would be mirroring the ball, going from block to block. You'd have Jarace then sliding to replace him and Ray J sliding to flatten out the defense to open up passing angles. You don't get it. So it's another turnover. Difference being here, same exact thing. Andrew's attacking from the side with Pascal. There's three players, but it's 5 out. And then just to point out, because I think that this has stood out tremendously about Andrew this year, is his deceleration. He's like literally going to perch on that one leg and then manipulate it so that he can open up Cam Jones there in the corner. Cam doesn't make the shot, but that's another thing that stood out. And then also how often there's been more movement behind the pick and roll. So if everybody wants to watch, look at Ben Shepherd and look at Johnny Furphy on this play when Andrew catches it into a handoff with momentum and speed to get downhill, uses the Pinoy step to manipulate the defense, and then opens Pascal in the strong side corner. That's making it way harder on the taggers to recognize Micah Potter, but also is giving, like I said, a head of steam to Andrew, and then Andrew's using little nuances in the middle of the floor, like what Samson said whenever we introduced this. That's a difference from when they're in Toronto. It's static spacing. Nobody's moving behind him. He's going to draw help from Brandon Ingram in the strong side corner, despite just making the shortest, easiest pass to Jarace. He literally probably makes the hardest possible pass to Isaiah Jackson, and now that's a turnover. So lots of differences here, and this is what I really wanted to get your thoughts on, because this is a rare sighting of Jay Huff actually rolling to the basket against the Miami Heat. And something that I find interesting here is I've noticed in the NBA this season that for bigs who play and drop, there's rare opportunities where they can start stabbing at the ball. So if you imagine the big acting like a fencer sticking out, their sword.
Riposte.
Exactly.
Yes.
There's a few opportunities where you can do them, and one of them's right here, like when the point guard's looking over their shoulder to spot that tag or look at where the roll is, look at where the shake is. Like Kel'el Ware could be using his outside hand and jabbing at Andrew, but he doesn't, because Andrew does a pretty good job of being able to maintain his dribble in the middle of the floor while also glancing in that direction. Jay Huff actually rolls, and that's like a rare sighting of a lob pass that we've seen this year. Compare that, another really big opportunity where you can do this is when the ball handler is hostage dribbling. Because imagine, you're that ball handler. Not only are you having to look at the roller and the shake, you're also, in order to hostage your defender, having to look over your shoulder to know where your defender is to get them on your back. So as soon as Ben glances there, Kel'el Ware's like, you know what? I will poke at the ball here. And it's going to be really hard for you to pass against the jab, keep your guy hostage, and also be able to see where the passing angles are available. He doesn't trust Ben to be able to do that. So the jab actually rescues Hami Jaquez as the hostage. He can get back in front, and then this ends up being like an odd floater pass lob. So it's telling to me that Kel'el Ware wouldn't even try that in the middle of the floor when Andrew had the ball versus I wrote an article about him doing that heavily against Ben in that game. And then just the other thing that they're doing, if you watch Jarace here in this game against the Heat, that they did repeatedly, is if Jay or Micah's going to roll, they're almost always doing roll replace. So as Jay was rolling, Jarace is lifting up to the top of the key because, again, Aaron, like Aaron said, Andrew attacks deeper. So it matters to him that he has somebody top a key to be able to use as an outlet. And that's like, there's been minor spacing changes. I think some of the nuance from Andrew has been better. And I think that kind of summarizes it. But those were the main things that I had seen.
Yeah, I also think, like, I know synergy is not, I wouldn't rate it as highly as stats coming from like Second Spectrum or Genius Sports, but the points per possession that Andrew's able to get on drives is really, really high. Top 20% of the league, I believe. And he's doing this without effective 3-point shooting or below average efficiency 3-point shooting when he makes a pass. And basically this is if you're I think if you're a scout or if you're somebody trying to make sense of like who are the players who will eventually be quite good driving the basketball, even if they don't have like a total burner in the pull-up three, you'd want guys who are comfortable in the middle of the floor, who have counters in the middle of the floor, because that's where the most dangerous playmaking is done. Despite that being, for a couple of years, like the middle of the floor, you don't want to die there. A lot of players found more unique playmaking avenues. Andrew Nembhard being like a 46% pull-up guy on mid-range or on twos is incredibly important. His herky jerk, constantly stalling out, starting again pace, it constantly puts defenses in like, well, what am I doing now? How does this change where I want to be? And it gives, I think, teammates around him opportunities to make reads as cutters. And it keeps that aspect of like unpredictability and comfort if nothing emerges. Satisfying both of those things means that you probably can be a really strong driver, even if you don't have like this major 3-point weapon to open up big lanes, even if you're not like a world-renowned finisher. You do this kind of stuff, and you're going to be able to build out your game more and more. And Nembhard, even when he came into the league, was starting with a pretty strong package in that regard. And we've seen it step by step, I think, improve.
And I just want to add on here because nobody had this as a specific question that we're going to answer for this particular mailbag, but I don't want it to come off and sound like Andrew's a guy who has to play with a big who's top of key. I think the difference is, and people have asked this, like, what type of big do the Pacers need? Do they need a floor spacer or do they need somebody in the dunker? Because they've heard me talk about on this podcast that the dunker pick and rolls have been very ineffective for the Pacers this year for the most part. I think the difference being here is what I said before, that Andrew is capable of playing with a lob threat. He can get deep. When Isaiah had more pop and vertical bounce out of those spots, he was able to throw lob passes to him regularly, especially when he was a rookie. But I think that's the difference. The spacing aspect, playing with Jay Huff and Micah Potter or Pascal at the 5 like they've been doing recently, matters on a team that was shooting, bottom of the league for many months. That just being able to play 5 out in general and not having to contend with the bodies matters. If you're putting somebody in the dunker spot or you're having somebody as a roller who's a legitimate lob threat, I think it would be different than what the current situation is. So I don't think this is entirely informative. I do think it matters for the rest of this season with the people that they have available, that they're playing with spacing bigs more often. That doesn't mean that this roster is locked in to having to play with a spacing big into perpetuity, I guess is what I would say.
I think with the combination of Tyrese, Nembhard, and Pascal, and Aaron even, you could go a lot of different ways at the 5 into the future and find success, probably.
Next question. Before I ask it, I need to know, did you watch the Pacer Thunder game on Friday?
Yeah. Okay. I've watched the Thunder lose to 2 very fun teams.
It means you're going to win a championship, I'm pretty sure, when you beat the Thunder without Isaiah Hartenstein and without Alex Caruso and without Jalen Williams. But it was still a very good win nonetheless. Certainly the best win the Pacers have had this season. So James T. Sandberg says, I admit that I am caught in the moment of this Thunder game, riding as the fourth quarter starts. This may age poorly quickly, but it feels like we're finally seeing some growth from Furphy in the process and Walker in the product. Are my eyes deceiving me? And I think what we're going to do for this question, because I told Samson ahead of time, what I did is I clipped what I thought were highlights of both of these guys, specifically from this game against the Thunder. And we're going to try to determine from this, why were they successful in the game? And does this portend that they're going to continue to be successful in those ways in the future? Starting with Johnny Furphy, a couple numbers that I want to roll out there to you in case you didn't know them. I have tried to coin the phrase "furf around and find out." It has multitude of meanings, Samson. First of all, a lot of players try Johnny
Yes.
Furphy in isolation and find out that he's not going to give up quite as easily as they think he's going to. So he actually ranks first on the team in ISOs defended per 100 that end in a pass or turnover.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't what's going to get tracked when it's only tracking usage. When the player passes or they commit a turnover, Johnny Furphy defends the most of those per game per 100. He's also among the 8 players on the team who have defended at least 50 ISOs. Furphy ranks second in the percentage of his ISOs defended that have ended in a pass or turnover, which is second to only Aaron Nesmith, who also has the lowest volume because he's only defended 52 ISOs this year. Some of this is because teams are ISOing him so much because they think they're going to find an advantage that they don't often find. But it's starting to show up in the impact numbers. Cleaning the glass is now showing that the Pacers are better defensively when Johnny Furphy is on the court. And the other meaning of furf around and find out is the Pacers played Johnny Furphy very sparingly at the 5 many moons ago against Boston and against the Milwaukee Bucks, in which he defended Garza and he defended Miles Turner. And I thought, this is something, especially in a season without Obi Toppin, I'm going to continue monitoring this, and I think they should keep experimenting with it. And since then, they have now started 3 games, technically with Pascal at the 5, not Johnny Furphy at the 5. He's the person guarding Bam. He's the person guarding Chet Holmgren. But they are plus 15 in 73 minutes without a traditional center on the floor when they're playing with Johnny Furphy and Pascal Siakam. So before I show the clips, I will let you react just to those numbers that I've shared to you and what you've thought of Johnny Furphy's defense this year. Because I will remind everybody that on our Summer League podcast and in our mailbag podcast, I was like, that was the person I was saying to keep an eye on. So your thoughts?
So, forgive my language, he's kind of a shit brick house. He is strong as hell. And you can see a big part of what I don't find his feet to be very good. I think he struggles like navigating the close little spaces a bunch as a defender. And that's why the isolation stuff makes a ton of sense to me. Mano a mano, big spaces, try and meet a guy. And it is so rare from what I've seen that a guy meets Furphy's body and is able to like unwind and unfurl past it. He's just he's like a moving wall, and he offers no quarter. He offers nothing to the driver, and he's been pretty good at predicting, reading, and meeting guys at his legal point of defense. And as far as the defensive stuff, as a big, he's really strong. His lower center of gravity, I don't know what's motivating it, but it just seems like he's hard to move. He's a stalwart wherever he is on the floor, and it's Dean Wade kind of offers some of this kind of stuff. Maxi Kleber, if you want to go like white guys who were better defensively than people thought, both those guys offered more in front court matchups and offered more in isolation defense than most people thought, because they were offering similar things to what Furphy is doing here. Neither of them had that insane offensive above the rim pop that Furphy has, but yeah, those are the big motivating factors for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think in many ways it's more so that he almost projects himself bigger than he actually is. He uses his length incredibly well, whether in on-ball
Samwise
situation
in
or
the tower. He has the shadow, you know.
So these are the clips of Johnny Furphy, and we are going to show a couple because I mentioned this before we get to the Thunder game. So this was in the 4th quarter against Boston, where I was like, he's actually on Garza here, and they were having him switch out to Jaylen Brown. And the reason why it stuck out to me so much wasn't just because he got the stop and actually sat and kept his knee on that counter from Jaylen Brown and forced the pass. It was because at the end of the Eastern Conference Finals in Game 4, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were like repeatedly hunting Obi Toppin. And Obi Toppin, for the many things that he does well, he was not going to do that if you needed to play small with him at the 5, where he was going to be able to switch out and get a stop. And then in a blowout against the Milwaukee Bucks, the Pacers were like, let's just try, something to change the complexion of the game. So they put Johnny Furphy onto Miles. The Bucks kind of strangely were playing with Miles and Jericho Sims during this spurt. And, Miles is somebody who is going to settle for a turnaround. mid-post shot over Johnny Furphy, but still. And then he also took it from him out on the perimeter. And this was the other part that kind of reminded me of when they play Obi Toppin at the 5, because Johnny Furphy adds a lot of pace and athleticism to lineups where if you can get these types of pick six plays, like he almost always is going to sprint to the other end of the floor. I shared a stat the other day where of everybody that's played his equivalency of minutes in the NBA, Ben Shepherd plays the highest percentage of his minutes in the fast pace zone, which is 14 feet per second or faster, and Johnny Furphy ranks 8th in that category. So then fast forward to the Thunder game, and we actually are seeing him, Pascal gets beat here by Chet Holmgren. Johnny Furphy, second line of defense, actually gets, the weak side block and then collects the rebound. His rebounding is actually an underrated skill as well. You'll probably remember when the Pacers played the Raptors and threw a ton of zone at them in the fourth quarter, that wouldn't have been possible unless Johnny Furphy was collecting the rebounds that he was getting. And then there's a verticality contest on basically a peel switch there against Lou Dort. There's some stuff where, again, another vertical contest against Chet Holmgren. Here, Pascal's starting to get beat. They've been doing more peel switching in these smaller lineups. So Johnny's like, I'm going to peel switch off the corner. He doesn't know that Andrew's behind him. The minute he recognizes that Andrew's behind him, automatically recovers to Wallace. Wall's up against Wallace under the basket, then helps in the gap on this drive. Wallace does get loose and make that shot, but that's really good recognition because it's important to remember that Johnny Furphy's only 21 years old. Like a lot of these plays, I think, and his recognition with this in the scheme are pretty impressive given his age. Again, I'm not going to tell you that he stopped Shea every time in isolation, but in that case, this one he switched the handoff and then actually uses his outside hand, which he's, like I said, he's pretty good at using his length in those settings. Another isolation against Shea where he didn't just like give up a ton of separation on the bump and was able to still use his length in order to contest. And then this one too, he was actually defending Isaiah Joe in this game, denied the handoff, and then when they flowed into split action, denied the split action pass to Shea as well. Like this is a lot of different skills to be demonstrating against a lot of different players in a team that has the best record in the NBA and that beats the Pacers in the NBA Finals. And then this is just an example of how much he's consistently running the floor. TJ, I thought, could have actually lobbed him there, and he didn't. And then this is one that I want to get your thoughts on with regards to his defense. Watch his closeout technique right here, and you tell me what you think of this.
I remember the Raptors doing this with Grady Dick.
They both went to Kansas, which really legitimately makes me wonder here because I pointed out, I think I told you, I might have just been in an article, but he's always very high in his closeouts. Like he has a lot of trouble getting low, and he often will chop feet. He will slow himself down. And in this case, he kind of closed short, and Jalen Williams puts the ball down on the floor against him. But I looked at all of his closeouts. At the point in time when I wrote this article last week, he had 80 closeouts. 70 of them were full closeouts. Only 8 were short, and only 2 were flyby, which to translate that for everybody means he's effectively closing out in the same way against every player that he closes out against. And so just as a few like little weakness things that I've kind of noticed here when we get to these clips, Samson talked about him being pretty strong. I think here on against Kenrich and in the Philly game when he was defending Kelly Oubre, he can give up space after a bump against wings who are very physical and can get lower than him because he doesn't have a lot of bend. And then look at that closeout. Like that's against Sam Hauser, and he almost always chops feet, slows himself down, goes with incredibly wide base. So he creates a landing space for Sam Hauser to land in. He's not going to foul him, but he's still getting a 3-point shot. Yes, it's a contested 3-point shot, but wouldn't you ideally be running him off the line and be forcing him to take a pull-up 2 or take 1 or 2 dribbles? Like this is pretty consistent. Same thing against Con Knippel, which Knippel is a far more varied offensive player than Sam Hauser, but anything that you want to add there, the closeouts, anything else that you've seen from the 21-year-old Johnny Furphy defensive film?
Not outside of what I said at the start. The closeouts are really, I noticed that too. What an interesting.
He's the only player doing this. So like, I don't think this is, I mean, it's not like the Pacers are teaching this technique throughout the roster. Like, hey, you know what? We actually just want to contest threes and create this landing space so that we're not fouling on the threes, but it's a contested 3. Like if it was a team-wide thing, but it's not. Like the only other person who's close to doing this is Ben Shepherd. Everyone else is more aggressive. Like Andrew almost always goes to a hockey stop when he closes out. But I don't know. This is kind of hard for me to figure. I can't decide if they think he just doesn't have, like I said, he does not have a lot of bend. He cannot get low. So if they're just thinking this is the safest possible thing for him to be doing, but I mean, I would almost prefer, like, especially if you're guarding Hauser or Knippel, I would almost prefer the flyby, especially Hauser. Like, just go to his side and get him off the line.
The big thing, Especially if you have like a heavy recover defense. Because some guys, if you do the flyby and you're on a bad team, they
Mhm.
just like pound dribble sidestep and like you don't have any
Yeah.
support. There's some bad defenses. But if you have a defense that's keyed in, usually that'll get you somewhere. I guess like Grady, they started teaching him the hockey stop, and he started going to that. And especially since he's a peel switcher, sprint into hockey stop into
Yeah.
recover like that works really well for him. Although this brings up the thing that is this is a attention for analysis. If you don't have access constantly to the ear of a head coach or a development staff, is like, hey, why is this guy doing this?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's shrouded in like who wants to do this and why. Because sometimes players are just doing their own thing, man. You know what I mean? Like, but truthfully, I don't know. It's unique though in the NBA.
I do not know either. The other player that stood out in this game, Jarace Walker, scores a career high 26 points. Shot 3 of 6 from 3. The 3-point shooting, I don't really want to go into because I've been saying for a long time that his impact to me, I don't want it to be dependent on whether or not he makes threes or not. But he did tie his career high for points in the paint in this game with 10. And he also had his third most drives in a game of his career in this game. Why do you think that was? Well, and just for further context, this is a player who there's 119 players in the NBA who have attempted at least 100 field goals in the paint after taking at least 2 dribbles. And Jarace has the worst effective field goal percentage at 38.1%. And he also has the third worst shot quality at 40.2% among those 119. So that's where he's been. There's been subtle signs of progress over roughly the last 2 weeks. I've written about him like 3 times in the last 2 weeks. So why do you think he had success against the Thunder? What stood out to you against the Thunder, and do you think that it's replicable what he did? And I'll just
So
run the clips by side while you're talking.
yeah, there's a clip I do really want to talk about with Jarace. There's a term, what is it? Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. When I watch Jarace, am
Sorry.
consistently, I'm kind of disappointed with his imagination for how he thinks he could finish a drive sometimes. Like that, great. The whole thing about being a big driver, God, anyway, I hate that play. I hate that pass, by the way. I don't like it.
Oh, I
Take it.
actually really liked it.
I
Why did you dislike it? Let me go back.
look at, is it Isaiah who's the low man? Or it's Kaysen.
Chet was tagging, so Jarace uses the pump fake and attacks.
Yes.
Kaysen is he's low, but he helps and slides laterally. Lu Dort is covering Johnny Furphy there. Like this is the correct crackback read to me.
For me, I want that ball going up. Like I want craft. I want like even
you want him to attack Kaysen.
Yes.
And it be his shot against him.
I do, yes.
I think that we're going to get into why he didn't do that. For me, I'm just happy he stayed under control and was actually able to identify the open Pascal Siakam in the corner.
So what I want, and this is the thing about like doing film and like or low lighting, is that what I want is not like the slide to the pass to the corner. What I want is like a pound dribble into a 2-foot gather and go finish.
And I'll explain to you why I think that isn't happening. But
yes,
given who Jarace is, I like the passing read
yes.
that he made, given the rotations from the defense.
Yes. So I understand you're far more familiar with Jarace than I am. Although I am more familiar than most people. I maybe am dreaming of a different player here. But I want a guy who sees a small and has the composure not to make the read, but the composure to, yes, bring the ball to 2 and go up over him at the glass, not with a short push shot or something like that. And the big thing I was saying before is that a big man or even like a large forward, the huge benefit is your pickup point starts earlier, your strides take you farther, especially if you're driving a closeout. It means that a big man is moving with you or behind you. It means the small guys at the rim should be able to infringe upon your ability to finish less. And Jarace, I know so much of what makes his ceiling as an offensive player interesting is like decision making and short roll stuff and navigating the middle with, I think, plus playmaking. It just would be so much more oomph if, as you can see, there were on a couple of these plays, gathers with significant momentum where he is saying, like, I'm going to reach the rim. I love that.
That
And
one's great. And that bump into Jalen Williams, I think I can count on like 5 fingers how many times I've seen that.
yes.
I can tell you that from Synergy's numbers, he's completed 1 dunk this season in the half court after dribbling from outside the 3-point line, and it happened in this game.
Yep.
He also had multiple stampede catches in this game. Like, there was a lot of markers in this game that I'm like, okay, to the outsiders who are looking at purely Jarace Walker's measurements and what they might have expected from him, they're probably thinking those clips aren't that exciting. But given where he's coming from, there was actually quite a bit of progress here. Rick had a comment after the game where he was like, this is what we imagined from him when we drafted him. And what's interesting to me about that is, as people would have noticed in those clips, who's he being guarded by on almost all of them?
These are big boys.
He's being guarded by Jalen Williams at small ball 5, Chet Holmgren at the 5, and Brandon Carlson at the 5. So I think that's what led to him having, his 3rd highest drive volume game of his career, because the Thunder did this briefly in a game in March last year where they started putting Hartenstein on Jarace, and it was basically just like if Jarace was going to shoot or not. He wasn't going to punish the cross match off the dribble. It was progress from him that he was looking to attack these closeouts with actual attack against a big, but also then I checked the numbers. He's at 17.5 points per 100 half-court matchups against guards this year. He's at 18.8 against forwards. He's at 24.4 when he's defended by centers, because he has somewhat of a speed advantage, especially when he's using those stampede catches to beat the big in the open space. And because the Pacers started Pascal, the Thunder were not going to put 5s onto Pascal in that game. So whether they would still guard Jarace with a 5 if an actual center was out there on the floor, I can't really speak to that. But I think the reason he was as successful as he was because he was predominantly being guarded by 5s.
Karl-Anthony Towns syndrome.
Yes. Despite the fact that the Pacers predominantly guarded him with centers in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, I genuinely think that's what it is. But I do think that there's been more intention for him to get all the way to the rim. There's been far fewer of, I'm going to constantly look for the inside hand finish, even when it's asking me to square up and go with my left. There's been more sightings of that. Like, there has been progress that definitely wasn't there through his first 2.5 seasons of his career. So I want to give him credit for that. But I do think that some of it was directly connected to who was guarding him. And we're going to see that, I think, a little bit more in later questions, which is why it was important that Samson brought that up about, I want to see him use that pound dribble against Wallace in the paint. And I'm like, as would I, and settings that we're going to see later on. But I don't think right now that that's something that he's actively going to do. So for me, I'm just glad that he maintained both feet, stayed on balance, and read the crack back and was like, hey, our all-stars open in the corner, I'm going to get him the ball. But a lot of times, like, I don't want this to sound rude, but a lot of times Jarace's drives have looked like a meteor crashing, hurtling toward earth. That's what it's looked like this season a lot of the time. So this was much more under control.
I think a forward who is comfortable with a dead dribble in the paint because they understand I'm quite large, and even if the defense, like, there's at most 2 bigs coming towards me, probably just 1. Like, there will be a passing avenue for me. I am allowed to have patience. That is so key. And Jarace, with his size and his inclination towards passing, I just like, it doesn't have to be on the move. Of course, we know these Pacers. We know, like, Tyrese is like, carry your momentum with the pass to the rest of the team. Don't pass when you don't have an advantage. Pass when someone else has it. Like, this ethos is important. But Anyway, I'm wish casting. This is not a real player I'm describing.
There's going to be more wish casting in the next question. I can about guarantee that. So do you have anything else you want to add about Jarace and whether you think what you just saw was sustainable?
Sustainable, yes, because this is decision making, a lot of it.
If he's guarded by 5s, I think it will be.
Yes, it's if these needs are satisfied on the defensive end, and if he maintains this assertion, then yes. This is not some sort of shot making, like, how could this go on? This is just put the ball down.
Kyle Taylor asks the following: in a season like this, and with portion of the season the Pacers have remaining, what strikes you as the right balance of experimentation, even when it goes astray, versus playing within system and role, even if that risks a degree of stagnation for the player? I'm thinking of things like Aaron Nesmith's drives, which have been highly experimental and extremely ineffective. Do you fall on the side of greater experimentation or sticking to what works, and would you answer differently for different players?
So you do answer differently for different players. This is the job of the coaching staff. Basketball does not simply manifest out on the court freely. It has a guiding narrative per the coaching staff and kind of how you want to, ideally. And that means that roles and, responsibilities get doled out, based on merit of some sort, belief of some sort. Latent and nascent, we said at the start of the podcast. I think heavy experimentation is fun and good for something that you think will be a persisting problem, and organization and structure is good for things that you think will be consistent strengths. So, strengths, I would love to see the Pacers continue to work on, craft, calcify. Weaknesses, like the center position, look for answers, look for, what are the coaching staff or the think tank thing, which is like you bring something, you say, I think this could work, and then everyone joins in and tries to prove it wrong. If you can't prove it wrong, then you go on to the on-court concept with players and see, okay, does it work in reality? Like, that is where good things keep them good, sharpen them. Things you're weak at get funky.
My thing with this, really quick, just to address, because my example is not going to involve Aaron, but what I will say about Aaron is he is driving more often and the numbers are quite poor. I don't think that's an intentional decision by the coaching staff to be like, when I referenced Omaha earlier, it's not like they're calling Omaha for Aaron Nesmith and being like, hey, Andrew, get an attacking angle and pitch it back to Aaron so that he can attack downhill because we want to grow out his driving game. I don't think that's really what's happening here. I think it's more so because of, again, to repeat myself for the billionth time, because of changes in the geometry of the court. More of the shots are contested, which is at times requiring him to put the ball on the floor more often and figure out things as he goes. And sometimes he's not a player. We talked about this in the last podcast because I said I would like to see him at times go to a floater or a pull-up two more often rather than it all being Raymond threes, despite the fact that that's, I don't like this saying, but that's the analytical way to look at it. Sometimes he needs to find the middle a little bit better. But I don't think that this is like a goal of this season is to develop Aaron Nesmith's driving because we think that that's important. Like, certainly it would be great if he grew that out. But I'm not seeing a lot of that within the playbook in terms of them actually, this is something that we're trying to accomplish. I do have a past example. Oh, go ahead.
So there's all this positive space in this art we have to fill.
Exactly. Yes. That's a perfect way of putting it. But I actually do have a past example of when the Pacers did do what Kyle's suggesting here in terms of experimentation, even if it goes astray, and that they had a purpose for it. So when Benedict Mathurin was a rookie and the Pacers had pivoted to, playing a lot of lineups with Andrew at rookie point guard and Jordan Nwora was out there and Jalen Smith was out there over like the last, 8 or 10 games of the year, they started calling this play called early. I wrote about this in the piece that I was picking things that I wanted to see improvements from Jarace and Johnny Furphy at, but they called it early, and they were intentionally putting Benedict Mathurin in this Kobe Jordan spot of the court, which, again, analytically, you'd be like, why are they giving Benedict Mathurin room from 2-point range to isolate? Well, what they were doing is they're like, we'll take a couple possessions of this per game because we want to speed up his decision-making and basically give him a time limit of how long he has to create a shot. And then we're hoping over time that we'll be able to space this out and have him do it from three. But it was all about speeding up the decision making. So you would see these types of possessions once or twice a game once the Pacers have been eliminated from play in contention that year. And the results weren't always good. Like you just saw, some of them really did kind of stall out. Sometimes he didn't make the right decision. Sometimes it was inefficient shots. Sometimes it was no shots. But that was something that they wanted to actively work with him on. And this is where I get to with what Samson and I were just talking about with regard to Jarace. There was 8 half-court possessions in that game up in Boston where he was deliberately being guarded by Peyton Pritchard. Like, in this type of setting, I don't want to see TJ and Ijax run the pick and roll. I want to see, okay, he actually made an attempt to dive here. get Jarace the ball on the duck in and see what he can do in the paint on a post touch against a smaller player. Like, I'm glad there was at least forward momentum here. He's always going to go to the high gather, but I want to see what he does on the block. Like, he made another attempt here. I don't really love the process of this, especially turning into the help and then automatically just getting back off the ball.
Also, can you roll it back just a little bit?
And he got pushed clear outside the paint when he caught it.
That's what I was gonna say. Why? Pin your guy, and he lost probably 4 or 5 feet.
That was written about in the article, yes, where the post up started was also pointed out. But yes, then turns into the help and he's automatically off the ball. And this happened in Indiana against the same matchup too, where I really, on the repost, I really can't explain to you, Samson, why he turned and could have easily taken a shot over Peyton Pritchard and decided to make jump passes are not good now and threw it directly to Kita. I don't know. Just like this one, like, if you're going to duck in, like, I don't want to be this person. Don't want to be overly critical here, but the entire action is on the other side of the floor. You are 6'7", 6'8", being guarded by Peyton Pritchard. Duck in, and if you're going to duck in, do it early. Not right here where you're just cluttering TJ's driving lane. So, needless to say, this is a play that I saw the Denver Nuggets run for Aaron Gordon. If there's anybody in terms of playing bully ball at the 4 as a role player that I would really like Jarace to just study and watch, aside from Pascal, it would be Aaron Gordon, because the Nuggets were deliberately lifting everybody above the break so that he could go against that small guard. The Pacers have done this once or twice with Jarace, and to Jarace's credit, he needs to actually, touch the ball in these situations. But my point being is, just like they ran these plays when Ben was a rookie, even if they weren't necessarily going to be efficient, later in the season, I would like to see them legitimately be. And in matchups where they know that Jarace might be guarded by a guard, I want them to bully him to be a bully, even if the results aren't good. Because right now he has 8 post touches for the season. Obi Toppin has 3, and he's played in 3 games. So I just because the stuff that you said about Wallace in the paint on the drive applies in other aspects where his biggest hurdle on both ends of the floor is he has to be a more physical player. He has to be. He has to be able to absorb bumps as a defender. He needs to be able to do what we saw about Jalen Williams, where he actually delivered a bump. I think doing some of that in the post would be to his benefit. So to answer Kyle's question, is my answer different for different players? Yes, because, Jarace, it's not all about his draft position, but he was one of their lottery picks. He was taken number 8 overall. You're hoping to maximize him as much as you can. In a season like this affords you opportunities to do that. And if you can grow out that aspect of his game, not only just because of the post-ups, I just want every part of his game to be more physical. There could be more physicality in almost everything that he does.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron Gordon is the best example of off-ball doing it.
Yeah.
Scotty Barnes is also, his build is obviously not the exact same as Jarace's, but he's a really great example of, despite being, as far as all-stars go in the NBA, Scotty Barnes is very limited skill-wise. So much of what fuels his scoring is just a willingness to be will someone match the physicality? I'm pretty big. I'm pretty long. I'm going to go see. His first playoff bucket ever was a bully drive on Tyrese Maxey, where he went and dunked it, even though Joel Embiid was waiting, and it was will Joel Embiid meet me here? Bigs don't always meet you there. Jarace, sometimes there isn't even a big there. Take the little guy, put him in the rim. Charles Barkley, after the Eastern Conference Finals last year, he said, Pascal Siakam never lets a little guy play him. Jarace, never let a little guy play
Yes,
you.
exactly. Just put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Next question, Mitchell Klein. What is the point this season where you could see the team shutting down Pascal? He's playing great, but it's putting a ton of mileage on him with limited payoff, aka wins, and he's already one of the oldest on the team. The last thing anyone should want in this gap season, that's what it is, regardless what everyone around the team says, is to bleed even more into next season with some sort of Pascal injury, overuse-driven regression. Plus, it strongly behooves the team to push all in on youngster experience and draft pick maximization, aka the tank. When do you think that they should shut down Pascal? Or how should they handle this situation, Samson?
These questions are so hard. I assume Pascal probably wants to play 65 games so that he can maybe get another accolade on his resume potentially. If I don't well actually doesn't matter. He's not going to be all NBA. As good as he is, he's not going to be all NBA. I don't know, man.
Can I
These
just go on a mini rant here and say, regardless of all NBA, I do not want to hear any more people be like, "Oh, Pascal's played at an all-star level, but the Pacers have just lost too many games. It can't happen." But you can't leave MPJ off that bracket, Samson. You can't. Like, he's had too good of a season. That makes no sense. It makes no sense. The Brooklyn Nets and the Pacers have both are in the lottery. There's one win difference between the two teams. If you can, like, if losing automatically excludes Pascal from consideration, and that's your criteria, then losing should automatically exclude Michael Porter Jr. if that is your criteria. You
listen,
can't have him on your ballot if you're saying that the reason Pascal can't be on is because of losing. Now, if you want to make an argument that for some reason you think that Michael Porter Jr.'s had a better season, I will listen to that. I will strongly disagree with it. But I would listen to it. But
there's going to be a few guys, like 3 or 4 that end up on the Eastern Conference All-Star team. If Pascal doesn't make it, that he will be like a far, far better player then,
yep.
and he'll have played a lot of games and a lot of minutes. Like I read your piece, and also I've seen all of the stats. I've watched so much of him play. He's like comfortably above all-star level right now. I don't know how. Honestly, coaches, they might put him in. It's like he might get in, but regardless, I don't know when to shut him down. Maybe you just pare back some of the usage. Maybe you start looking for other avenues. Maybe it is like you said, like more of these plays go towards Jarace. You get opportunities, and it's not just the Jarace thing. You look for other developments. Maybe like, hey, we want more pick and roll reps for Nembhard with this type of player, and that means that Pascal's going to play 27 minutes a game. I don't know, but these are, I mean, people who make these decisions get paid millions. And I wish we did, but we don't.
I would like to make one. Based on recent past history, I think that what we can probably project and think is that they've already sat him 2 games in back-to-backs when they were playing very heavily condensed schedules. I think that they'll probably continue to monitor those types of situations based on, I don't want to call it a speech, but what Pascal said amid their 13-game losing streak when he talked about how important and how much basketball means to him. I don't think it's going to be easy to tell him that he isn't going to play games. That being said, when the Pacers drafted Jarace that season, when they were eliminated from play-in contention, they sat Tyrese and Miles the last 8 games of the year, which was somewhat an easy thing to do because Tyrese had been dealing with ankle issues, I think, and I think that Miles had legitimately had some back spasm issues that have recurred for him throughout his career. But they did. Like, once they were eliminated, they're like, we're going to pull it back here. So my guess is if they're eliminated from playing contention, you'll probably see a lot less Pascal. But before that happens, I think he's going to keep playing. And I'll admit, probably have to eat some of my own words here because when I wrote the Furph around and find out piece, I was like, I'd kind of like to see Johnny Furphy keep playing at the 5 because I want to know if he can mimic some of the things that Obi Toppin did. As it turns out, they've played Pascal is the person defending the opposing 5s much more often. And I kind of argued against that. I'm like, what's the point of putting that much wear and tear on him? Because, he's closed games guarding Joel Embiid. But now that I've seen it and they've done it against starting groups, I kind of would like to continue seeing it in spots just for the reason that I just said. I want to see how effective they can be with Jarace and Johnny out there, and not because I'm shoving Obi out the door. I think that they need to know, can those lineups be successful for us, because they do like to play smaller, and that requires Pascal to play. But I do think that they'll get to a point. I mean, I don't really have context of this, but when they played in Tampa, the Raptors shut Pascal down at a certain point, did they not, when they drafted Scotty?
Yeah, he had a shoulder, not a subluxation.
Oh, so he had an
his
injury. It
labrum
wasn't just like,
tore
we're going to
actually.
sit
Yeah,
him. Okay.
yeah. He actually missed the first 14 games of the next season, which is how he managed to be not an All-Star but All NBA that year.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, Mitchell, I'm fully there with you. I mean, there's nothing that could be worse that would happen this season than Pascal having a major injury. because then your window really would be slammed. Like
Mhm.
right now, I still believe in their ability to recapture at least a version of what they were. If that were to happen, you'd be in a really bad place. But I think that they'll continue to watch it. Jeff Hasser goes into some of what I just said. With the potential emergence of Johnny Furphy and Jarace Walker, combined with the eventual return of Obi Toppin, what will you be looking at regarding the forward rotation? Do these players have enough versatility to continue to play together with a healthy roster, or do these players, looking at Obi unfortunately, become pieces in trades to reinforce the center position?
I think if you can reinforce the center position, that's probably more valuable. That outweighs having like this, we have so many options at the forward position, especially we just talked about Pascal Siakam, he wears many hats depending on how the Pacers want to play. So the short answer is that you probably want to be making decisions based on that. And that also pivots well to our next question, which we don't have to go to. But yeah, that's the short answer.
I think that my answer to this is that they tried to play all of them at once last season. So there were minutes where they were playing 4-4s, where Johnny Furphy, Jarace Walker, Pascal Siakam, and Obi Toppin were out there with Obi at the 5. TJ was playing with them, and to be honest, I didn't really like those minutes very much. It became an inordinate amount of TJ ball, and they did not win. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but they didn't win the minutes out there. Of course, Johnny and Jarace are somewhat better now than they were then, and it kind of even stood out then that I was like, oh, hey, Johnny Furphy's defending at the point of attack in these lineups. That's something to remember and recall. But for me, like if I'm looking at Jarace and Johnny by comparison to Obi, like in Johnny's case, it's going to have to be, is he making above the break threes at a decent clip? Can he continue to push the ball downhill? Obi's not exactly known for his ball handling, but I have seen Obi attack from a corner and make the pass, reading the chain to the opposite 45. Like, are those things that Johnny Furphy can regularly be doing? Like Johnny's hitting threes right now, but it's typically when they're pretty much wide open. None of them are self-created. In some of the ways that Obi Toppin can at least go to a step back here and there. And then when they were in Detroit and everybody sat out and Asar was guarding Johnny Furphy because he was roaming off of him, that was a fairly rough watch. For Jarace, by comparison to Obi, Obi ducks in a lot. Obi does a lot of early work. Can he be as intuitive as Obi as a cutter? That's an area where Jarace has shown a little bit of progress, but could still be better. So, and then can either one of them guard a 5? Because to be honest, I don't want Pascal to be having to guard 5s all the time. And when Obi was out there, he was the person who would guard like Sabonis or Zubats because he is bigger than both of them, especially by comparison to Johnny right now. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. That being said, for me, like obviously Obi would be the contract that would more likely be matching. But in terms of the actual fit of this system and around the other players that are out there, Johnny and Obi Toppin play more to system than Jarace does.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I land. In some regards, Johnny's a bigger Ben Shepherd, but I would really like it if Johnny could be a slightly smaller Obi Toppin. If Johnny were a slightly smaller Obi Toppin, then I think you feel okay. If Jarace continued to show some progress, you'd feel okay. But there's lineups where Johnny's out there at the end of a game, and I'm having to watch Andrew Nembhard continue to guard Darius Garland, even while he's doing all of the playmaking initiation, and he's completely gassed. And it's like, Ben Shepherd probably could have guarded Garland. Johnny Furphy can't really handle the change of speeds of Darius Garland right now at the point of attack. So that's where I lean. I genuinely think, and more than anything, is they're going to have a lottery pick. And most likely with that lottery pick, they're probably taking a big wing. If they take a big wing, I don't think all 3 of these people will be on the roster next year. I think that one of them will get rerouted for them to answer the center position, or perhaps more than one of them. Who knows? So that's kind of a part of this, is that while Jarace and Johnny are showing development, will they still be in the lineup next year? I don't know. I guess it depends what they do around draft time, but it's always better when more people are playing better.
Mm-hmm.
Craig Lindemann, this kind of goes hand in hand. Okay, fine. I'm ready to admit that it's a gap year. So looking ahead, which bench vet will be most valuable to the 26-27 Pacers and why? J Huff, Obi Toppin, or TJ McConnell?
For me, this might be a little bit of a hot. I think it's J Huff, and I think it's because
Really?
I think it's J Huff because I think one of the most important factors in the NBA in playoff series that I think I'm observing is a diversity of front court. And the center position is really important in that. Sometimes it is being able to play like Pascal or Obi at center, but for some teams who are finding success in the playoffs, it is that duality of the center position. And I do hope that the Pacers answer the center position with gumption, with vigor in the offseason. And I hope that it is a guy, unnamed, to be named. And I hope that Jay Huff is number two. And I hope that the Pacers turn what ended up being like quite a weakness for them into a significant strength. That, and again, I said it could be a hot take, but I think like there's potential there.
I don't think it's J Huff. I think it's TJ McConnell. I realize he's going to be 34, but I still think the answer is TJ. He leads the league in drives per 100 possessions again at age 33. He's not getting to 3 to 10 feet as often. It's more like 10 to 16, but he's still producing at a very high level there. He's one of only 11 players in the NBA who've run at least 300 empty side pick and roll actions, and he ranks 5th amongst those 11.
He just churns, baby.
And I mean, he's incredibly critical to their entire pistol continuity series. That's pretty effective for them. And then also, I say it many, many, many times, but I think it's very valuable in the NBA right now to be able to play 2 point guards at once. I think that Tyrese, Andrew, and TJ matter a lot to all three of them. They outscored opponents by 5.4 in 1,964 minutes played a year ago, and they were better than when Tyrese was out there by himself when they got outscored. So I think they need to be able to play with 2 point guards at once. They don't really have a viable means of doing that a lot this season, and you can kind of see what some of the impacts on Andrew have been at times because of that. So I think in a Rick Carlisle offense, it matters to be able to have 2 guards. So I would still lean TJ. The thing that I would say about Jay Huff, and I'd kind of like to touch back on what you said about variety of bigs. Jay's had some good games lately. Like he scored 20 against Boston, and you could see I wrote a piece on the progression, his progression against defensive progressions where Keita wasn't guarding him at all. Then in the pick and pop, they started late switching and putting, Derek White would veer back, and then Jay Huff was still shooting over the veer switch. And then by the fourth quarter, it was like, okay, now it's Sam Hauser, and we're having to find other ways to attack. And the next game, Joe Mazzulla was like, we're just going to guard him with Sam Hauser from the beginning, and he scored 2 points. When they played against the Thunder the other night, he played 2 minutes and 22 seconds. And then he did not barely play against the Atlanta Hawks in a smaller game either. So I think that Jay Huff's been good for them, and I'll be glad if he's still a backup big on the roster. But I do think that there's going to be matchups similar to the archetype reasons of why Miles struggled against Boston and OKC. And if you think that Boston and OKC are still going to be there, this is why I wanted to qualify earlier when people are like, okay, well, you're saying that Andrew needs a big top of key. I'm saying Andrew needs a big top of key if the big and the dunker and the roll man aren't very good at operating out of the dunker as a roll man. I think that there's some evidence both ways that spacing bigs play very well in Rick Carlisle's offense. But I also think that archetype of big has shown a lot of limitations the deeper that they get into the playoffs and in these matchups. So if Jay's not going to play in every game, I can't pick him as the most valuable bench bet because TJ will be out there churning offense in every single game, presuming that he remains healthy. But I want to touch and follow-up question on you saying, because this is an opinion that our mutual friend Bowser to Bowser shares as well, that he thinks that it's valuable to have multiple different types of bigs in a playoff series. The Pacers have kind of, the last couple years, like they were predominantly, until they needed Tony Bradley for rebounding, they were playing the same, being Miles and Thomas Bryant. A year ago, they were kind of playing Miles and Jalen Smith because of, some of the system reasons that I laid out. What if the 2 point guards that you have just pair far better with either a roller or a spacer? Because, I mean, the guys who attack the rim heavily are typically going to pair better with a pick and pop big, and guys who maybe come off the pick and survey more or rely more on touch and skip passes, floater game, are going to pair far better with a lob threat. What if I have a point guard who just pairs way better with that? And what if my backup point guard's the same way? Do I still need to have variety at the big position?
Probably not as much. And the Pacers are probably a team that got away with it because not only is it Nembhard and Halliburton, but also like Pascal has proclivities to his game that lean one way. But I don't think most teams are built that way. Actually, very few teams are built like the Pacers, I suppose. But yeah, it's not important as like a golden rule. It's more so, I think I'm noticing it as a trend.
Because this is an opinion that a lot of people share, that they think that the starting big next year needs to be a lob threat, or maybe somebody more in the formula of Isaiah Hartenstein. I guess we're going to answer this question a little bit more when we get into the last question. So maybe I'll hit pause right now and we can readdress it then. And we'll just skip ahead to Matt Sherman's question. First time caller, long time listener. Curious to get your opinion on what teams will be the Pacers' biggest roadblocks on their path to return to the NBA Finals in the coming years. Turnaround teams like Detroit and heavy hitters like the Celtics will be obvious answers, but when you look around the East and the potential big trades that may occur, do you have any sleeper Eastern Conference teams that may pose as a problem?
Okay, so we're not allowed to say the Celtics or the Pistons.
Yep.
I guess there's room for the Cavs, if they find their way, they have a lot of talent on that roster.
The answer isn't the Cavs.
I'm giving the Cavs some respect, but projecting a lot of these teams forward gets quite hard, because for like the 76ers, you look at their backcourt, you say, wow, that's really interesting. But then you look at Joel Embiid and Paul George and you say, well, maybe it's not that interesting. You look at the Knicks, and I don't know what they're doing. The Knicks are actually behind the Raptors in the standings right now, which, as much as I like the Raptors, the Knicks should not be behind the Raptors right now. But maybe that's the answer. So I'll let you take it from here.
I think the answer is the Raptors.
The big bad Raptors. Yeah.
And not because I necessarily think the Raptors are championship contenders, but when we're talking about roadblocks to the Pacers, last year you and I talked about it. I thought that their bracket was very favorable to them. I liked the matchup against the Bucks. I liked the matchup against the Cavs. I liked the matchup against the Knicks. The Raptors, the Pacers are 1-5 against them the last 2 seasons. I looked this up. Of the other 29 teams, the Pacers have been held to the second lowest scoring efficiency at 1.057 points per possession when they've played the Raptors. And the Raptors have not even been a good team during the entirety of the last 2 years.
Hey. No, I'm just kidding.
So, I mean, and Rick said it after the last home loss. He said, this has not been a very good matchup for us for a number of reasons. That's something that I've brought up going back to last year, even when they were losing at the beginning of the season amid a very tough schedule. No team controls pace as well as the Raptors on both ends of the court. They load up in transition more than anybody. At the other end of the floor, they choke out the clock more than anybody, which is something that Fred Katz wrote a really great article about when he was talking about the luck that they've had from three-point percentage and whether some of that's been controlled by how deep they've played people into the clock. And when I looked it up, like, early offense is better unilaterally than late offense, but the NBA as a whole has shot much worse from three in the last 6 seconds, which might explain why the Raptors have had such big swings with, their defensive rating at times, perhaps looking better than it actually is with people missing a lot of threes. It's because they're forcing a lot of late threes. So those are typically things that bother the Pacers. And then also they just have a lot of big talented wings. And up until this point, the Pacers have not had very many wings to guard those people with. Even before Brandon Ingram played with the Raptors, they had a lot of trouble guarding Brandon Ingram when they would go to New Orleans. So I told Samson ahead of time, I noticed something in the last game that I was very confident that the Raptors had watched prior games of the Pacers and were like, we want to pinpoint that. We've seen this on the scouting report. We think that's going to be an advantage for us. So before I show the clips, what do you think it's going to be? Do you have any idea of what this is?
I have no idea. I'm excited to find out.
Okay, so the Pacers played the Orlando Magic not too long before they played the Raptors. Pascal was guarding Paolo Banchero, and the Pacers did not want to switch that matchup, and they were not doubling when Pascal was guarding Paolo Banchero. So anytime, like if Tyus Jones gets off the ball here and he's going to go screen, he was screening from north to south. And what you'll see is the Pacers didn't want to give up the matchup, so Ben Shepherd is showing on Paolo Banchero. And when that screen comes, Pascal was getting under the screen against Tyus Jones to prevent him from being able to have any momentum toward the basket to buy time for Ben Shepherd to recover so that Pascal could then get back to Paolo Banchero. They did this multiple times, and every time the screener was coming from the north, headed south, you'll see Pascal get under Tyus Jones again. If Desmond Bane was the screener, they did the same thing. So I think that the Raptors watched this film, and when they came to Indiana, look at the difference from Jamal Shead. He's screening from south to north. So they know that they don't want to give up Pascal onto Scotty. They didn't want to put Andrew onto Scotty. So Jamal Shed then does the hot stove screen trend where it's a push onto Pascal to force him over the screen. There's no way that he can get under like what we just saw against Tyus Jones. So then Jamal Shed's pushing into space, and it's a long recovery for Andrew to be able to get there. He misses that floater, but they did this repeatedly in this game. Again, they don't want to give Jarace up off of Scotty because they don't want to give TJ. But when
Brady
you're on,
Dick ultimate roller
yeah,
game.
but when you're on that low side, this, screen below, stay below, it's the hot stove, it's a touch to get that defender off balance. TJ's not expecting Grady Dick to go to the short roll area. You can see it in his eyes. He thinks that Grady's going to slip out to the perimeter, which is why he has a longer route winding back to get to Grady there, who Grady has a lot of size over TJ anyways. And the reason why I thought this was interesting too is, I don't know if you remember our conversation, but in game 4 of the NBA Finals, the Thunder were running tons of two-man actions between Jalen Williams and Shea against Andrew and Aaron, and the Pacers were repeatedly switching it, and Aaron fouled out guarding Shea, and you and I were like, they probably need to hedge and recover that. And I said, if they hedge and recover, don't you think they would just slip Shea into the mid-range area? And you were like, I don't think that would be his natural go-to. And as it turns out, the first couple possessions, it was not. But the Raptors from the get-go here, and this isn't a slip, to be clear, like they aren't going from north to south to slip. They are going from south to north, and they're going to get the best outcome either way. Because either TJ's is going to switch onto Scotty, or they're going to get Grady, Jamal Shed, whoever it is, Jamison Battle, rolling behind them with a longer recovery with size. Because like here, Grady even does it with a reverse angle screen. Like that was a late pivot. He gets underneath of Pascal. There's no way that Ben Shepherd can get back on an empty pick and roll to contest this. And just for your sake and your knowledge, this was the most inverted pick and roll that the Raptors have run in a game for Scotty in any game this season, and the third most of his career. Like, I mean, it was repeated. The hot stove screens are hotter than ever in the NBA, but the Raptors, I think that they definitely saw that against Paolo Banchero. We're like, this is something that we can exploit because they don't want to get Pascal off this matchup. And I've noticed them taking away opening plays from opposing teams. There's a lot of game-to-game scouting going on here. So I kind of want to know from a league-wide perspective, and feel free to say if you think the Raptors are a bad matchup or not for the Pacers as well, but what do you make of teams that do that degree of scouting in the regular season?
So the bad matchup thing, yes. And the Raptors used to do this versus the Cavs as well. Cavs, very talented guard-led team, especially when they had Pascal, Scotty, and OG. The Cavs were a better team the whole duration of the overlap with Donovan Mitchell, and yet the Raptors would always beat them. Powerful wings against some teams are just like damn near game-breaking, and the Raptors have a couple of them and have had those stocked for quite some time. Now Colin Murray-Boyles is also on that team too, which adds, and he's actually been a bomb-ass defender too, so it adds a wrinkle there. And then what do I make of like heavy scout? I love that. Like, make the most of it, and the Raptors, they also dole out the scouts to different guys. Like, it's a big cultural thing in their coaching staff is the scout who gets to do it, how it acted out on the court and all this kind of stuff. It is like part of how they get rah-rah from different parts of the team, like not just the players on the roster. I think it's awesome. I love, like, I know there is some gamesmanship of like, don't show X or Y, but I also like just like go win, go put your players in those positions and see how it goes. Once you start adapting, I think I find this to be true. A team that adapts a lot is a team that will continue to do so, and a team that doesn't may struggle to. So even if some of the adaptations you've prepped aren't available in the playoffs, I still trust you to keep adapting further, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think every team probably rotates scouting assignments between assistant coaches game to game. But I don't know what I think of that, because part of me thinks if you're doing that degree of scouting where you know every counter to an opening set, like they did this against the Clippers. Scotty was phenomenal taking away a turn screen from Nicholas Batum that other, like the Thunder, the Warriors that got beat by, he knew what it was. He denied it twice. Like if you're doing that degree of scouting, I think a lot of times when we're watching and are like, oh, this is just the regular season. When it gets to the playoffs and there's exaggerated game plans, the Raptors have an exaggerated game plan almost every game right now. So, I mean, they're having to implement it, yes, and maybe that speaks well to their ability to adapt from game to game, but is there another level to go to when you get to the playoffs, if that makes sense? Like if I can think in my head, well, right now it's just regular season games. What's this going to look like when it's game planning? Well, I'm seeing what it looks like with game planning because they're doing a lot. Whereas the Pacers, like, I don't want to say that they didn't. They've changed things midseason in the past, but like when they got into those playoff series, like if you watch back the finals, they changed significantly what they were doing defensively 4 times within that series. And maybe you're saying like we tried a lot of things throughout the regular season, so we know we can pull back to those, and maybe that's more meaningful. But yeah, just in the games I've watched of the Raptors, they've done an extensive amount of game planning in the games that I've seen.
Well, you look at the Raptors they're not a finished product. I don't know. Like, yes, you and I were much higher on the Raptors than the money consensus, the analyst consensus as well. But you and I don't look at that team as like, this is a ready-made team to, pull the levers and have their top-end talent with a great coaching staff go over to the top. This is a team that wanted to battle its way into the playoffs and get some answers there. And honestly, I think like if they get to the playoffs and they're like, damn, we have no levers to pull, let's see where the talent takes us, then you get some answers there too. But the goal of this team is they paid for it, go make the playoffs. The staff is working very hard and the players are to get them there, and they'll have answers. And probably more so, like, this is a team that requires probably more like roster adjustments than it does like gameplay adjustments for the ultimate end of it. So I'm glad they do that.
CMB is a starting 5, Samson.
And their defense is incredible. They just keep making it work.
There's another person to study for physicality purposes, Jarace.
He is the biggest bastard on the court, man. He is just like, he puts his hands on you.
He plays defense like he's somebody shining a flashlight in a movie theater. Other recent mailbags about the center position, but specifically, how important is rebounding in the context of the strengths the Pacers should be looking for in their center of the future? With teams like Boston and Houston building much of their identity around crashing the offensive glass and the increasing focus on quote-unquote possession and the general NBA discourse, I'm curious for your take on what this means for a team like the Pacers when Tyrese is back. Is rebounding less important, relatively speaking, for the Tyrese-led Pacers, whose path to win the position battle has historically been their lower turnover rate? And should that impact what they look for in their next center? Or do you feel broader league trends necessitate an increased focus on rebounding at the 5 for Indy, even potentially at the expense of other skills they've previously benefited from at the position? This is a great question, by the way.
Yeah. I think that rebounding is, of course, like important, those extra possessions, but offensive rebounding versus turnover percentage, if I can just take it there, I think when I was looking at this, turnover percentage has a higher correlation with offensive rating than offensive rebounding percentage does. And just on its face, and I don't know if I'm being like an idiot here, but an offensive rebound guarantees you a possession, but the lack of a turnover guarantees you a shot. I don't know if that works out perfectly, but I'm sure the math kind of works out there because you can get an offensive rebound. I don't know what the points per possession are after an offensive rebound. They're probably pretty good, but if you don't turn the ball over, you can get an offensive rebound, even though it might not be at the same percentage as another team. Whereas if you get if you're great at offensive rebounding, you still turn the ball over. I don't know. What I'm saying is probably sounds nonsensical, but in my head, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that you like rebounding wouldn't be one of the foremost skills that you'd be like penciling in as something that the Pacers absolutely need at the center spot. Is that what you're saying?
When I look at what they failed at, they were able to navigate the rebounding stuff with some cleverness. And what they really struggled with was like composure and shot making. And so I would value that higher. And I don't know if you go look around centers who have composure and shot making, I'm not sure, but that's more than rebounding.
Would you allow me to go on a wending path of where I think the future of rebounding is going?
I would love to go on a wending path.
Okay, so in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs last year, the Pacers had a 12.7 turnover rate against Milwaukee, Cleveland, and New York. That's elite. That shot up to 18.4% against the Thunder, who obviously were the league's best at forcing turnovers. So at that point, when you start committing more turnovers, the possession matters. How many times during our playoff coverage did I say the basketball is the most important part of
Something
basketball?
about that, yeah.
The team that grabbed more offensive rebounds in the finals went 6-1. The only exception to that was game 3 that the Pacers won, despite the fact that they didn't grab more offensive rebounds. It's very telling to me, once again, that Jay Huff, who is probably the worst rebounder among the bigs on the roster, only played 2 minutes and 22 seconds in that matchup against the Thunder the other night. There's things that I like about Jay Huff. It's just that, like what Samson just said, shot making composure, the Sam Hauser of it all, like the swing from scoring 20 points against drop to having 2 in the next matchup. Those things definitely matter. But here's what I want to say more broadly is, so there was something that happened last season, and Samson and I talked about it very early on, where when the Pacers weren't playing to pace and people were like, why aren't they playing as fast? I was like, some of it's because there's this new thing happening called tagging up, and the Philadelphia 76ers grabbed 20 offensive rebounds against the Pacers, and the Pacers had basically no hit-ahead passes in that game, and it was with Gershon Yabusele playing at the 5. They had 20 offensive rebounds, and they weren't even playing a traditional 5, minus some with Andre Drummond, but they weren't tagging up when Andre Drummond was out there. They were tagging up when Yabusele was out there. And I was like, this is going to be a thing. Well, Fred Katz has since written an article that drew a lot of attention early this season about tagging up, but it's really been going on for more than a year now, with several teams doing it a year ago. And so the thing that happened is, last year, the NBA as a whole recorded more offensive rebounds per 100 possessions on threes than shots in the paint. And some of that's because the NBA is taking more threes, but also the teams were grabbing more offensive rebounds on threes per 100 possessions than shots in the paint. And that gap has widened even more this year, and that was not the case the prior 5 seasons in the NBA. So this signals a shift as to why are these teams getting more offensive rebounds off threes? Well, it's because everybody's running to the backs of their matchups. This season in the tracking era is the highest for teams crashing with at least 3 offensive players. 21 possessions per game the NBA is averaging with at least 3 players crashing. The Pacers were part of this trend at the beginning of the year. In preseason, they were averaging 21 possessions. Then at the beginning of the year, they were ranked 4th, 17.9 possessions. And then, Samson, we talked about the Raptors a lot in this pod, but something happened against the Raptors when Brandon Ingram made that game winner. In that game, the Pacers pulled back their ball pressure, and they weren't tagging up. And I wrote an article titled, "The Pacers are tightening up their defense by loosening up their pressure." And I wondered, are they going to start loosening up what's been their signature ball pressure now? Or was this simply because they played a lot of games against Toronto and Chicago, who live in transition and they valued getting back? As it turns out, since that game against the Raptors, they are now averaging 5.9 possessions per game with at least 3 players crashing, which ranks 25th. So they went from 21 in preseason to 17 through mid-November to now down to just 5.9. I think the explanation for that is this was a very depleted roster. Jay Huff emerged and was starting at center. His radius is kept better closer to the rim, and I think they decided the best way for us to preserve the players we have is we can't be pressuring all the time anymore. We have to be more deliberate with the spots that we do this, and ball pressure and tagging up go hand in hand. When you're sending multiple people to the glass and you're scrumming into the paint, pushing middle, you're already in position to pressure the ball. If you're not, and you're like, we need to get back against the Torontos, the Chicagos, whoever it is that lives in transition. The point of tagging up is it's supposed to be a transition defense. You're supposed to stay on the high side of your matchups. But I can tell you from my observations that some players have adapted to this much better than others. So what I'm telling you is the NBA has hit peak offensive rebounding right now. But the Pacers tried to join this trend, and they are no longer actively, heavily part of the trend, which makes me wonder, because of the rigors, think about how much this requires to be a Pacer team that, again, was depleted, but you're playing at a heavily fast pace. You're moving the ball, snap, 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 snap. Tons of decision making. You're pressuring the ball, and you're asking people who are contesting threes to now scrum into the middle, be crashing, and be picking the ball up full court. That's asking so much physically of the players on the court. And logically, it makes tons of sense. Logically, doing this made sense. But in practice, it didn't end up being something that some of the teams that were doing it aren't doing it as heavily anymore. So I guess my long-winded point about this, which I have 3 clips to share in conjunction, is the following. You could go pursue a great offensive rebounding center, and if other teams are doing what Philadelphia did in this game when Yabusele was at the 5 and they're sending everybody, like Isaiah doesn't do well here, but it's not really going to matter if just your center is a great offensive rebounder. If this is what's happening, if the rest of the people on the floor aren't keeping guys off the glass. Again, the majority of shots for offensive rebounds are now threes, not shots in the paint anymore. So it's not just about the one guy that you have in the middle that's going to magically necessarily fix this problem. That being said, Miles Turner is not a good rebounder. Like everybody who's watched him, the Pacers have been a lower rebounding team every year that he was on the team. So stuff like this, like would I like this to be better? Yeah, absolutely. Did it need to be better in the finals at sometimes? Yes. But the point being is the Pacers were trying to do this, and like I said, not everybody took to it. Like right here, Taylor Peter, you cannot sneak under the matchup from the corner when you're crashing. You have to stay on the high side. Otherwise, you've already killed the coverage, and now the Thunder are headed the other way. So my take is I'm not sure that tagging up is necessarily at the NBA level going to be here to stay. And if it is, you're not going to remedy it just because you have necessarily Steven Adams. And obviously he's an elite offensive rebounder or Mitchell Robinson, but you see my point. It's going to have to be a team-wide approach, and rebounding is always a team-wide approach. So my answer would be, and I'm just going to throw an example of a guy out there, Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a good rebounder. He's actually quite poor. Some of the reason why he's a bad rebounder is because he offers tons of defensive versatility and he's switching out 30 feet from the basket. He's not in position to rebound. If you were to tell me, oh, the Pacers have the matching contracts, this is on the table, I would say, yes, get that done, because you know what else he's going to give you? He's going to give you spacing versatility. He's going to give you elite defensive versatility. He can turn over either shoulder, and he can do something against a cross match, provided that the cross match isn't Alex Caruso and the Thunder are doubling him nonstop. That might be a problem at times, but I don't think that necessarily needs to be the top priority, but it would depend on who the center is. Does the center offer you things that Miles Turner didn't do while also being a floor spacer? Then the rebounding doesn't matter to me as much. That's the way that I see it. And that was a very long explanation, but that's what I have for you.
I'll cap it off with a couple numbers. Let's say you get that guy and you say he's going to wrestle with Alperen Şengün because the Rockets make the finals. Amen Thompson has more offensive rebounds per game than Şengün does. The third best offensive rebound percentage team in the NBA is the Charlotte Hornets. Obviously, Diabate and Kalkbrenner do a lot of work there, but Con Knippel, Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, Josh Green, LaMelo Ball, all between 0.9 and 1.2 offensive rebounds per game. It's pursuit, man. And it's just our conception of what offensive rebounding is not the same anymore. And I was going to ask you, like, the MRI machine was originally with NASA and they had other designs of what it might be, and then it became something different. Do you think that tagging up aimed to be transition defense and found that it was instead offensive rebounding?
I think that tagging up at the high school and college level more often was thought of as a transition defense system. And if we generate extra chances, tremendous. I think at the NBA level, because there's so much extra ground coverage to get out to three and to be able to get back, and the amount of fatigue that's going into this, I think it's more often becoming you're generating tons of 50-50 opportunities, and sometimes your transition defense is suffering from it. I'm very curious to see if when this roster is fully healthy again, if the Pacers will try to do it again. But certain people didn't adapt to it. Their transition defense had suffered to an extent, and just the tremendous amount of fatigue when they were already down so many bodies. I mean, they were the team that set the ball pressure trend, and they themselves were like, we have to pull this back in certain settings. I mean, they did it in game 6, which was a point. I'm like, if you still have to have Andrew doing all this initiation and he's still going to be guarding the other team's best player, you have to cut back on the load somewhere. So maybe it's, hey, you're picking up at half court, not 94 feet. So we'll see. But I think it's very boring, but my very short, too long, didn't read answer is it really depends on the big. There's bigs that I could say, like, okay, their rebounding isn't great, but they do so many other things that the Pacers are kind of uniquely positioned for what Casey wrote in this question, that because they are so low turnover, they can absorb some of these bigs who might not be great rebounding generators. But again,
Mm-hmm.
like what you said with the men, it's not the way the opposing teams are generating offensive rebounds isn't just from that one person, minus, a few examples. So, all right.
Savvy.
Last question, a somewhat fun one. With more NBA teams letting players pick their own introduction song for the starting lineups, i.e., Micah Potter and the Harry Potter theme, what would your intro song be?
I think it would have to be "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." I love that song. I love that song. I used to sing it with my mom and to my mom when I was a kid. So that would be my song, I
That's
think.
what gets you hype.
Yeah. Yeah, when, Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell start singing, I'm like, when they say, "Listen, baby," and then you're like, whoo.
You know what song I've been listening to a lot when I've been riding during this cursed season? Frank Sinatra, "My Way."
A mi maniera. I love the Gypsy Kings version of that song. It's so good.
I think the standout lyric here is, "But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all and I stood tall and I did it my way." It's what I've been thinking a lot when people keep telling me that I need to write trade articles and other things. I'm like, well, I might face the final curtain, but I'm still going to do it my way. So that's what we just talked for an hour and a half about, a lot of nerdy basketball things, and minus pursuits of centers. We didn't discuss any fake trades.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible.
Oh, Frankie, man, he can sing. Nice deep baritone on that guy.
I don't know how hype the crowd would get from that, but I have listened to a lot lately.
Well, think about, like, this is a crowd that's also familiar with Victor Oladipo. Oladipo should have and now he should have came in like that singing. He would have done really well. He sing his own intro,
Could have
like
put
at
on
the
the
dunk
Masked
contest.
Singer, whatchamacallit outfit, and
Mm-hmm.
popped out of it. The last thing, I lied. The popsicle of the month. This is it. It's not a great photo. This is through my glass door of my house because I wasn't going outside, but I needed somewhat decent lighting. My sister made this of things that she had at her house and then trudged through the snow to bring it to me yesterday. She had orange and she had banana. So it is an orange banana popsicle. And I decided that it was somewhat sunny during what has been absolutely terrible weather. And while the All-Star game is not in Orange County, it is orange. It is somewhat close to LA. And so this is my good vibes for Pascal potentially making an All-Star team, because I feel like, given everything of what this season has been, that would be.
How much snow did y'all get in
I
Indiana?
think there's 9 inches right now,
Wow.
at least where I am.
We got nearly 2 feet. It
Last
set a
night,
record.
last night I woke up in the middle of the night and I looked at the weather, and it was because it was freezing in my bedroom, and it was -1 regular temperature, and it said it felt like -20.
That is some wind chill.
Warm.
Daggum. 19 degrees of wind chill.
It was
Holy
very
moly.
cold. And the bad thing is that my bed in my bedroom is on the outside west wall, and it was blowing because it was like ground blizzard conditions. I was like, I'm freezing. I had 5 blankets on.
Damn. Yeah. This polar vortex, its limbs have reached far into a few different places.
I watched a basketball game at 1:30 yesterday, Samson.
Yeah, that's true. Hopefully with some hot chocolate and a lot of blankets.
And the Pacers did make it through their own version of the long, cold winter, as I had called it, while I continued to add more L's to long and cold. They are on another 1-game losing streak, but they almost had more wins in January than they had during the entirety of the months before that. So at least we've covered a somewhat more compelling team, not only in the wins column, but I do think that there have been, to answer our overarching question, I do think that the Pacers have had at least some small wins in development of late, both with, maybe fringe rotation players, but also in things that Andrew Nembhard has done and other players have done that can hopefully carry over for the rest of the season and into next season, when this roster, I pray and hope, is fully healthy at some point in time.
I think these things are what makes a podcast go long, at least in my experience. I know most podcasts, if you ask them like a specific question, they'd be like, I don't know, you do this or do that. And they could talk about like 13 minutes of the permutations of a potential trade, perhaps. Like, oh, but if they did this, what's this guy worth? But it's when I'm asked questions about potential development that I'm like, wow. this could go a lot of different ways. Like, and because there's, players are endlessly unique. I know like in Toronto, it's like, is Scotty Barnes the big Kyle Lowry? And you're like, well, could Johnny Furphy be, big Ben Shepherd or a little, otherwise? It's players are so similar in so many ways, but then the more you dig down, they're infinitely unique, which is why podcasts like this can be an hour and a half about
Or
tagging
it's
up.
because Caitlin rambled on about offensive rebounding and hot stove screens for a good 20 minutes.
It was wending and it was good.
Well, do you have any final thoughts in this hour and 35-minute proceeding that you want to throw out there, given that we only talk to the people once a month now?
I've recently gotten into puzzles.
My sister loves puzzles. I'm not a puzzler.
You want something with a trophy at the end of it. You want competition.
Oh, I like strategic things. Like I love the Professor Layton DS games where you have to solve puzzles, but I do not enjoy jigsaw puzzles.
It's I find it like meditation. Just sitting.
That's how she finds it.
Yeah.
She finds it relaxing. I don't find it relaxing. I'm just like, where's this freaking piece? Like
That's so good.
just like now I'm just searching for annoying piece in a pile of wood. I don't know.
There's something to that.
Unfortunately, they didn't make the Grim Fandango 2 since the last time we talked either. That was another bummer, but
heartbreaking.
Okay, well, this is the end of the podcast, and I prefer it. I host at the beginning. I write monologues that some people like and some people hate, but I think everyone unilaterally likes your outros, so I'm going to let you do it.
I've not heard a single word against your monologues.
There has been words against the monologues.
Really?
I just want to put out there the reason the monologue exists is because I like long form content. I want what you and I to do to be a mixture of old school and new school media. So I like turning on shows that would open with a monologue to tell you what the tone of the program was going to be. But I also want it to be new school and that we're sitting here talking about, tagging up and other film things. So that's why it exists. And also, like during the playoffs, I didn't have a lot of time to be doing my own written work. So I felt like the monologue was where I got to highlight my writing ability, but some people found them to be incredibly stiff and said I was awkward. So sorry about my stiffness and awkwardness, but the monologues will continue. Frank Sinatra, sing the song.
Go to hell, man. That's crazy. I love, there's everything is slop now. Everything is slop. And everything is just focused towards like, do you have the cachet for your slop to matter? Like Stephen A. Smith, you get to comment on everything because you have the cachet for your slop to matter. It's compelling because it's you. And this is a system that only rewards you the higher you go up. Have we heard of this before? Is there something else that mirrors this? And we've completely done away with like, what if someone worked hard on this? And this is like something that they've thought about and pieced together. This is really somebody thought about this, worked on this, provided and poured themselves into it. And 83 people see it because it's an old form of content in how it conveys itself versus somebody like hearing something off the cuff, but they have cachet. They have some sort of thing on the internet and they mindlessly babble about it for like 3 minutes. And that is the info on this particular thing. There are no guardrails anymore, and I hate it. Quality has gone to hell. I have this quote. It was from a documentary I watched, and I can't remember it exactly.
Was it about rock skipping?
No, that is a great quote, though. Nothing can be meaningless when we imbue ourselves into it. But it said that content, the term, is an attempt to flatten everything into slop and to make it equal in its verbal standing. And I think that's what it does. And you and I are forced to use the term content sometimes. And I know you try not to use it and I try not to use it because it's like, it just flattens everything. Everything is content, so everything is equal. It's just what gets more views. Really? I disagree. I think some things are more valuable than others. I don't agree with this, everyone gets an opportunity. Nope, get good at something. I'm just, anyway.
Speaking of value, I do want to add on really quickly that I've made the executive decision that everyone can watch these mailbags, but the questions were sourced from people that subscribe to the website. Those are the only people that have been able to ask and engage with this. And the reason Samson and I are able to do it is because of the written work and because of the people who are subscribing. Samson's still writing monthly pieces. I'm still writing regularly. As you can probably guess, this has been a tough year to be independently employed in the NBA when the Pacers go from the NBA finals to having, the worst record in the NBA. So for those of you who have trudged through, I appreciate you. And I encourage those of you who may have just listened to us for the first time to go to a great website, which is Basketball She Wrote, patreon.com/Basketball She Wrote. I'm sorry. Yep.
It's the best. I will echo the sentiment that I echo every single time, no matter how glib it comes across or trite to my co-host. Caitlin is the best person doing this. If you want to learn about basketball, great. You can do that. If you want to learn about Pacers basketball, holy smokes, this place is a treasure trove like you wouldn't believe. It was like when I discovered, there's certain things you're like, wow, it opens up a whole door of understanding to basketball. I've had this in other avenues of my life, facets of my life. And Basketball She Wrote is that for so many people. Like, I didn't even know you could think about basketball this way. And that's what Caitlin provides. Truly unparalleled in the market and in the market of NBA media. She is the best of the best. Caitlin, thank you for having me on again. Listeners, thank you for tuning in with us. We appreciate you so very much. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And of course, over at Basketball She Wrote, patreon.com/Basketball She Wrote. And whether you got into this in the morning or at night, from myself and Caitlin, have a blessed day and goodbye.